Hey everybody, this is Derek Murphy. This is the second live video that I'm making for the relaunch of this book, which is How to Write and Publish a Book on a Budget. There's a free PDF. There should be a link probably under this video, and it's available on Amazon. The new version's a little bit messed up right now because I tried to do some fancy formatting stuff. And I'll talk about book design and formatting tomorrow. I'm not going to get into it here, but editing is such a crucial part of writing a book, and it's one of the hardest things. So I want to make a video about my editing process, what it's like to work with an editor. I've been a developmental editor for many years, but I've also worked with a lot of authors and a lot of editors, and I know a lot about the process and what goes into it. The reason it's such a challenge is that most authors' first books may not be very good. They may need editing, they may need help or support, but editing can be really expensive. I'll talk about the pricing in just a minute, but the problem with editing is that normally you'll have something like a proofreader who will fix the typos and the mistakes, a copy editor who does, a spot check where they go looking for punctuation and grammar errors. Line editor focuses a little bit more about the art or the craft of like how the words sound together. A developmental editor, which would do more big picture stuff. So the problem is if you want to get all of that, it would cost a lot of money, and a developmental editor may not be the best proofreader. It's a very different skill. I'm really good at developmental editing because I know story, so I can figure out what's wrong with your book and suggest ways to fix it. I'm also a pretty tight proofreader. I can fix your grammar and your typos and your spelling mistakes, but that's not a great use of my time because there are automated tools for that, or you can have beta readers who will find mistakes. And most editors, I don't think, are qualified to comment on really big picture story things because it's not taught very well. You can be great at English language, you can be great at grammar and spelling and not know how to fix a broken story. So even if you are a good editor, you may not fix the things that really need to be fixed. And that's the problem with hiring an editor, is that it's hard to find a good one who will fix everything. And even if they fix your writing and clean up the mistakes, it won't turn your book into a more commercial success. It won't give your book more sales or more customer satisfaction. Of course, you want a really clean book. So I'll talk about like my phase of going through and cleaning up your book to make sure it's ready to publish. But the point of this book, which is How to Write and Publish on a Budget, is that you don't have to spend thousands of dollars to publish your book. And the thing I see a lot of people do is they will, spend a couple $1,000s on editing and they get a cheap cover, and then they haven't built a platform, they don't have an email list, they can't get any book reviews. And the danger of, like, you can learn a lot working with an editor, but they can only fix so much. So if you don't have, they will take your story and they will try to make it better, but they can't write your story for you. They can't rewrite everything. They're not a ghostwriter. So I've had people complain that they, spend a lot on editing and they're still not getting the reader satisfaction that they want. There's only so much an editor can do. So I strongly focus on Bookcraft first, because you can do a lot of the work and the revision and the self-editing before you ever hand it over to anybody else. And even then, it may not be worth the money to work with a developmental editor. If I had to choose one or the other, I would probably choose a developmental editor if I didn't know what I was doing. I don't really let people touch my writing. I know that my story is strong. I should have a proofreader who can help me to find typos before I publish. I have like a 7-step revision process, and then I run it through ProWriting Aid and Grammarly. So I catch almost everything, but out of a 100,000 word book, it's common to still have a dozen or even 24 typos or spelling mistakes. It's difficult to self-edit your own work because you know the writing so well and because you've been over it so many times. It's really easy for you to skip over some things, which is why it's really useful to use an automated tool like Grammarly. I've tested ProWriting Aid and Grammarly side by side. Grammarly finds more mistakes, but ProWriting Aid sometimes finds mistakes that Grammarly doesn't. So using both helps. If you have a review team, if you have some sharp proofreaders who can help you to make a list of the typos or the errors before you publish, that's great. I usually admit that I rush my process a little bit. I usually put a book up on pre-order and I'm rushing for a deadline, and I barely get the book written in time. So I publish with some typos, and then I upload a new manuscript a day or two later. I will usually publish it and send ARCs to my readers and just not do really any marketing or promotion until I've updated the cleaner copy. But of course, some people will buy the book anyway, and I get some reviews about, typos or mistakes, which you want to try to avoid as much as possible. Like I said in the last video, I don't think it's the most important thing. Of course, you want to be professional. You want to have a clean manuscript, but that's just passing the bar. That's just good enough so that readers won't, run away because there are too many typos. So you have to try to make it as clean as possible, but you really have to focus on the story and the content, because if the story and content is good enough, people aren't really going to care about the typos too much. And there's a difference between typos and mistakes and punctuation stuff. I mentioned in the last video, I don't use commas or hyphens as well as I should. Not necessarily because I'm lazy. Part of it is I think that they are distracting, so I choose not to put them in my story, even if it's technically incorrect, because I think it's a smoother reading experience for my readers. The readers don't care. The people who care are authors who want to read my fiction to see if I know what I'm talking about. And some of those authors are also editors, and then they comment that, I can't write, or my fiction is no good because they found typos, they found grammar mistakes, or whatever. They're not my audience. My audience, the readers who I'm writing for, like my stories, and that's the main thing that I focus on. I've already talked about ProWriting Aid and Grammarly. I do recommend them. It's just one final step. But editing is not just proofreading. What a lot of people do is they'll finish their rough draft and then they'll clean it up. They'll focus on, getting rid of the typos. That's not really the important thing. I wouldn't worry about typos until way, way late revision stages, because you're going to be doing significant rewrites and revision. When the first draft is done, the first draft is just telling the story, and you may be figuring it out. Maybe you're following a plot outline, maybe you're just making it up as you go, but you may not know what happens until you've told the story to yourself. So when you get to the ending, you can finally go back and see how everything fits together. So I have a 3-step revision process, which is what, how, what, why, and how. And I have other videos about this that are a lot more in depth in the writing courses. If you pre-order Bookcraft, then you can get free access to these writing courses. I think there's also some links inside of the book about my writing courses, but I have a really long video with slides walking through this process. There's also some stuff on YouTube. But basically, the first revision I'll go through with the what actually happened. So once I get through the first draft, I will want to make things better. And I'll have to go back and make sure that all the things that are happening are the right things at the right time. So that's all I'm going to be worried about is, where the scenes belong, who's in the scene, what are they doing. This is where I would really focus on the conflict. I mentioned the 3 points of conflict in every scene, which is external conflict, other things that are happening to your protagonist, internal conflict, which is the moral struggles or reactions to the external events, and sidereal, lateral conflict, or peer pressure kind of conflict. I haven't found a good name for it, but basically within your team of allies, people should have cross purposes. People should have their own individual desires or aims or goals, and they will be fighting or arguing, even though they're on the same side. There might be jealousy, there might be relationship stuff happening, but there will be conflict between your characters. And if you focus on those 3 types of conflict, you'll probably have a strong enough scene. In every scene, there should be conflict. Dialogue is the killer of conflict. You don't want your characters ever to sit down and discuss things, because if they talk out all of the information, there won't be any suspense. So you have to interrupt your characters. You have to create drama and suspense by interrupting the narrative and withholding answers from readers for as long as possible. But that's what I'm focused on in the first draft, which is the what. It's building up the conflict and the suspense and the intrigue, and making sure I have tight turning points. So one of the other things that I will do is figure out my scene breaks. Whenever anything new happens, you have to stop. What I see a lot of new authors do is they'll glide by their big reveal. So some huge new reveal or piece of information happens in the scene, and then the characters just keep going. They don't react to it, or it's in the middle of action and the action keeps going. That's where you have to stop the scene with a hard scene break or a hard chapter break, so that there's a pause, so that readers know that this was a big deal, and then you have the reaction to the big deal. That's one of the easiest things to fix, and it's something that I see where it's just structure. Your story is structured poorly if the big reveal happens somewhere in the middle and it's swallowed by the action and it's glossed over. You want your big reveal, like the point of your story are those big turning points and those big twists and reveals. You have to really focus on them by adding a stop sign, which is a hard scene break. Anyway, that's what I'm going to be doing in the first revision, which is the what. In the second revision, I'll be going through and I'll be focusing on the why, which is, why are my characters doing this thing? Why are they feeling the way that they're feeling? If they're not feeling enough, I don't have enough pressure or motivation. People do not go into danger willingly. Smart characters don't go into danger willingly. So all conflict has to be unplanned, which means characters will never deliberately go into danger. They will figure out the risks, they'll discuss and make a plan, and they will try to avoid direct conflict. The direct conflict will happen anyway. So the conflict is unplanned or unexpected, not because your characters didn't think ahead, just because it was something that they weren't prepared for. So those are some kind of easy, quick tips, but I really want to be focused on, now that I have the what, why does any of this matter? That's the emotional heart of your novel. How does this impact my characters? Why are my characters the way that they are? Why is this meaningful? Every story worth telling means your main character, your protagonist, needs to have an impossible goal. The crux of the story is forcing them to choose to try to do a thing that they are incapable of doing. They're not strong enough. It's too difficult. It's too hard. They have to be motivated to put themselves at risk, even though they don't feel qualified. They don't feel good enough. And they have to decide to take action anyway, even though they don't think they will be successful. They have to change in the story by forcing them to become more, than they are currently capable of. Otherwise, the story doesn't really matter. Another really easy tip, I'm kind of glossing over a lot of the stuff that I've talked about before. I have a lot more detail in the slides that I'm glossing over quickly. But the other really easy one I mentioned about backstory is backstory is resolved conflict. Whatever happened a long time ago, there's no real stakes or danger. It's important because it helps readers have a deeper appreciation for the characters. But it's not going to matter until there's real conflict and real stakes that's happening in the real story. Then you can reveal some more backstory to help readers understand why this is happening and why they should care about what's happening, or why this is so meaningful or difficult for the protagonists. That's the stuff I'll be doing in the second revision. So I'm not even talking about typos or sentence structure or any of that stuff yet. This is just the what and the why. So the what is like, putting it all together, throwing the spaghetti on the wall. The why is pulling on the strings and making everything tight, adding more conflict, adding more intrigue, focusing on character motivation. Why are the people doing the things that they are doing and reacting the way that they are reacting? And you want to always be pulling in opposite direction. So creating conflict just means all of your characters want different things, which puts them at odds. So you're creating tension by pulling on those threads. The third passive revision that I'll go through is the how. So I've done the what and the why. The how is, okay, as if this was on TV, if this was a Netflix serial or a movie, what does this look like on camera? How are people dressed? How are they moving? How do they get from place to place? How did that object from chapter 3 end up in chapter 12? Keeping track of all the threads. So when I'm talking about how, it's, how do things actually look? How am I describing? And so at that point, I'll be building up my descriptions. I'll be going in and being like, what does this scene look like? What does this place look like? What are they wearing, or what do they have with them, or the transportation stuff? Those are the details I would save for this third pass of revision, because it's important. But if you build out your description or backstory early on, none of it matters yet, unless you have the what's happening and there's a lot of conflict, or the why is this happening, and readers care about what's happening because they understand the context and it's important. Then the description doesn't matter. But once you have that stuff, then of course you can build up the story by making it more visual, by focusing on what does this actually look like? How is this being presented? The other really easy thing to do, I've talked about in other videos with the show, don't tell. An easy rule to figure out if you're showing and not telling in the editing process is, what are your characters doing right now? If this is on screen, if this is, a movie, are they just standing still while the narrator is telling the reader stuff? If the narrator is describing what happened a long time ago, or a flashback, or describing what people are thinking or feeling, rather than having the characters actually act out the scene. You want your characters to always be doing something on action. You don't want the narrator to be talking directly to readers while your characters are standing there. So that's all about the how, is I keep saying what, but basically, how does this look is the question you want to be asking, which is the character description and the building out. At that point, I would be focused on the sentence structure to some extent to make sure, at least with the description, I would be building out, moving things around, building out, rather than just a stream of dialogue. I'd be breaking up the dialogue with action, what they're doing while they're talking to each other, how they're moving around, things like that. That's basically my third pass of editing. And then I would start in with the actual, that's the 3 stages of revision. The actual editing stuff, then I would start going in and being like, okay, everything is there, it's good. Now I'm just fixing. So if I'm fixing, this is where I would go through and I would get rid of revision, especially when you repeat the same information twice. I would get rid of anything like that. Withholding information, like I said earlier, it's about information management. So making sure that the reveals come at the right places and they have the right emotional impact. And then finally, I would be doing proofreading for typos or punctuation or spelling. I would make sure, I'm spelling everything the right way, or I'm punctuating things the right way, making sure I'm describing things the right way. I often get names wrong in books, and I'll have to go through and make sure I have the right name spelled the right way. When you're drafting or when you're doing revision, it's easy to insert new dilemmas or new problems. So that's kind of my process. But it goes to show you that it's not just about editing or typing or proofreading. And the problem is, if you hire an expensive developmental editor, they can't really help with a lot of that stuff. They can suggest improvement, but they can't rewrite it or do the heavy revision. They'll be doing the fixing. They can make your story, they can make your writing so much better. They can identify red flags and try to improve your story. And a good editor will do a pretty good job, but they're expensive for a good editor. And even so, as I mentioned, they can only take it so far. I strongly suggest that you get my book, which is Bookcraft, get my free writing courses, which come with the book if you pre-order it. Fix as much as you can, learn as much as you can, because even if you work with an editor, the more you can fix the story, don't focus on the typos, the punctuation, or the writing or the words on the page. Focus on the drama and the suspense and the conflict and the intrigue, because that's the stuff that actually really matters. And that's the stuff people have the hardest problem with. So when I work with writers, that's mostly what I will do. I'll work on the big picture stuff. I don't really do a lot of proofreading anymore, but when I work with authors, I love working. I have a service which is like the first 5,000 words only, so I can do a passive developmental edit of the first 5,000 words, because most authors make serious problems in the first few chapters that are fixable. And if you fix those things, you'll have set up your entire book for much more chance of success for both fiction and nonfiction. The first few chapters are really important. Most authors screw everything up in the first few chapters, and if you clean those up and redistribute that information, you're going to have a much better chance of sucking readers in, which is important, because I don't know if I've mentioned this yet, but the weird thing about indie publishing is that readers will not give your book a chance. They will download a whole bunch of books. If it's a famous, traditionally published book that people keep telling them is amazing, they might try it out, but if they get bored because it's not going anywhere, then they might give up, except they keep hearing about how amazing it is. So they might finish it, and then they, get to the end. You can afford to have a slow build book if you're traditionally published and you have a huge readership, and if you're a famous author. If you're self-publishing, you can't really afford not to make sure that your book is really tight in the first couple of chapters, because readers won't trust that it's going somewhere. If your book doesn't seem like it's hooking them, if it doesn't have the conflict and suspense in the first couple chapters, they're just going to give up too early. They're not going to stick with the book, assuming that it's going to get better, because a lot of books aren't. Well written or well developed. Those are kind of all the points that I've got. Someone commented I bought the book a long time ago. It's not this book. I'm making these videos to talk about write and publish a book on the budget. This book has a little bit of writing stuff and editing stuff, but it's a really light introduction. It's mostly about avoiding publishing scams, or avoiding publishing packages, or paying $5,000 for an editor when you're not really getting what you need to make your book successful. So what I talk about in this book is just how to publish on the cheap, how to do as much as you can yourself without spending, because I think everybody should be able to publish a good book even if they're on a budget. But my next book, which is coming out in December, is Bookcraft, and it's all about the craft of writing. It's really high level, write craft stuff that nobody else has really talked about before. I'm excited about that book. It's on pre-order. If you buy that book on pre-order, when it comes out, you'll have access to some writing courses as well. I think that's all I kind of wanted to say in this video. If you have questions about editing, I was kind of saying, like, I have a first chapter critique service. Someone else asked if I have a book written to help nonfiction writers. Bookcraft, which is the one coming out in December, will also have a big section just on nonfiction. I decided not to separate them between fiction and nonfiction, which I probably should have, but Bookcraft is the craft of writing good books, both fiction and nonfiction. There will be two different sections. There's also going to be a free companion course for fiction and nonfiction. So prior to the book, get a whole bunch of writing courses for free. It's a good deal. The book is going to be really good, but also download this book and review it on Amazon. It was an older book you might have gotten before, but there's a new edition that is much revised, that has links to all of my updated publishing content. So I think that's going to be really useful. That's why I'm making these videos right now, just to kind of talk about this book. I mostly just wanted to fix it and clean it up. I now have 2 months to write the next book. So I'm probably going to be making a lot more videos and content about writing in general. But mostly I'm going to be disappearing for a while because I have 2 months left to make this book amazing. I'm up to like 500 pre-orders. I'm shooting for 1,000 pre-orders. So I have to make sure that the book is really good and it's done on time. But I'm making these videos just to kind of quickly cover some of the stuff that's available in this new edition. I also recently republished Book Marketing is Dead, which is also free on Amazon. If you haven't gotten the new edition of Book Marketing is Dead, you can look for that as well. tomorrow, I'm going to come back around the same time and do 2 or 3 more live videos talking about publishing and promoting, basically publishing and promoting your book and book design and formatting. So I'll save all that stuff for tomorrow. It's hard to get really technical when you're just doing a live video, because I can have, like, it's much easier with book design to show you how I'm designing covers. Maybe I'll do that on a live video tomorrow. I'm not really sure if I'm set up for that, but that would be interesting. Let me know in the comments what you think, or if you have any questions about the editing process or the writing process in general, or my books or whatever. I would appreciate reviews, especially if you download this book and you take screenshots of anything inside that resonated with you that you thought was, good or interesting. I'm also trying out a thing where I've got a link in here to Mark Dawson's course. Mark Dawson has a really good book, a really good course on self-publishing. I'm currently not really working with clients, but a lot of people have been asking me for, a basic self-publishing course. How do I actually upload my files, choose my keywords and categories and everything? And so if you need like a first-timer guide to self-publishing, that's the course that I recommend. It's only open for another like 48 hours. So I'll post a link. There's a link in the book, but I'll probably post a link on Facebook or something tomorrow. But anyway, I hope this video was a little bit helpful. I'll come back tomorrow with more live videos. If these are useful, leave me a comment. Let me know what you're working on or what you're struggling with. Anyway, bye-bye. It's actually like almost midnight in Taiwan, so I'm going to shut down for the night and go back, maybe do a little bit more work here. But I hope your books are going well. I hope you're writing. I hope that my resources are helping you to write better books. I'm really excited about Bookcraft, which is coming out in December. Let me know if you have any questions. Bye-bye.